America's $8 billion disaster that refused to die. It was meant to be the future of naval warfare, a warship so advanced, so lethal, and so intimidating that no enemy would dare challenge it. When it was unveiled, the Pentagon promised it would redefine the very meaning of sea power. It was the Zumwalt-class destroyer, America's $8 billion super ship. But today, many call it something else, a floating monument to failure. This is the story of how one of the most ambitious projects in US military history became one of its biggest embarrassments. A story of politics, engineering, corporate power, and the unstoppable momentum of a disaster that refused to die. The birth of a legend. The story begins in the late 1990s. The Cold War was over, but America was still flexing its muscles as the sole superpower. The US Navy wanted a new kind of ship, something that could dominate coastal regions, launch precision strikes, and evade detection. The idea was bold, a stealth destroyer. Unlike traditional warships with tall radar profiles, this vessel would cut through the seas almost invisible to enemy radar. It would use futuristic angular designs, composite materials, and advanced radar. Absorbing coatings. On paper, it sounded like science fiction made real. A warship with the radar signature of a fishing boat. A ship that could sneak close to enemy shores, unleash devastating firepower, and vanish before anyone even knew it was there. The Navy named the class after Admiral Zumwalt, a reformer and visionary. And with that, the Zumwalt-class destroyer project was born. At first, it looked like a dream worth pursuing. The Navy originally wanted 32 of these ships, a new fleet for a new century. Engineering marvel or monster, the Zumwalt was packed with innovation. It was designed to carry a crew of just 147 sailors, less than half the number needed for older destroyers. Automation was the key. Computers and advanced systems would do what hundreds of sailors once had to. The ship's advanced gun system was its crown jewel. A massive cannon that could fire long-range land attack projectiles or laps, guided shells that could strike targets over 80 miles away with pinpoint accuracy. It was the Navy's answer to precision land bombardment. Then came the integrated power system. Instead of separate engines for propulsion and weapons, the Zumwalt's electric turbines could generate 78 megawatts of power, enough to run an entire small city. This made it the first warship capable of supporting railguns and directed energy weapons like lasers in the future. The ship was unlike anything else on the water. Towering, futuristic, angular. It looked more like something out of a Hollywood movie than a real naval vessel. But here's the catch. When something is this ambitious, the margin for error is razor thin. Cracks in the dream. Almost immediately, problems began piling up. The first issue was cost. As advanced as the Zumwalt was, it was also breathtakingly expensive. Each ship cost over $4 billion to build, but when you factored in research and development, the per-unit cost ballooned to over $8 billion. To put that into perspective, for the cost of one Zumwalt, the Navy could build 10 Arleigh Burkett-class destroyers, proven ships that were already dominating the seas. Then came the weapons problem. The advanced gun system, futuristic ammunition, the LR lap shells, turned out to be too expensive. Each round cost nearly $1 million. Firing a single shell cost more than launching a cruise missile. By 2016, the Navy quietly admitted it could no longer afford to use its own guns. Yes, you heard that right. America spent billions building a warship whose primary weapon system was essentially useless. As if that wasn't enough, the ship's cutting-edge propulsion system began failing during early deployments. In 2016, the USS Zumwalt suffered an embarrassing breakdown while passing through the Panama Canal, leaving the world's most advanced destroyer dead in the water. What was supposed to be the pride of the fleet was turning into a global punchline, the point of no return. At this point, logic would suggest the Navy pull the plug. Too expensive, too flawed, too impractical. But that's not how defense projects work. By the mid-2000s, billions had already been sunk into the program. Entire shipyards had been built around Zumwalt, ceased construction. Thousands of jobs depended on it. Canceling it outright would have been political suicide. So instead of building 32 ships, the Navy scaled back to just 3. Each one cost as much as an aircraft carrier, but carried a fraction of the firepower. It was a compromise that satisfied nobody. The Navy couldn't admit failure. Defense contractors kept their contracts alive, and Congress kept the money flowing. The Zumwalt-class had become what critics call a zombie program, too flawed to succeed, too expensive to cancel. A disaster that refused to die. By the 2020s, the Zumwalt-class destroyers were still afloat, but their purpose was murky. The Navy quietly rebranded them as test platforms for hypersonic missiles, railguns, and laser weapons. In other words, they became billion-dollar experiments. Yet the ships remain in service, consuming resources, attracting controversy, and haunting the very institution that birthed them. For many military analysts, the Zumwalt is the perfect case study of how America's defense machine works. Once a project reaches a certain level of investment, it doesn't matter if it works or not, it simply refuses to die. The aftermath. The ship without a mission. When the USS Zumwalt officially entered service, there was a quiet but uncomfortable question hanging in the air. What exactly is it for? Its guns couldn't be used. Its cost was astronomical. And its stealth design was impressive on paper, but critics pointed out that once a ship fires its weapons, its stealth advantage largely disappears. The Navy tried to retrofit the Zumwalt into new missions. Hypersonic missiles became the buzzword of the 2020s. The ship's massive electrical output, originally designed for weapons that never materialized, suddenly looked useful. Why not make the Zumwalt the Navy's hypersonic missile carrier? It was a clever attempt to breathe life into a project that many considered dead. But at its core, the Zumwalt remained a symbol of excess. A ship designed for a war that never came, armed with weapons it couldn't fire, patrolling seas it was never really needed in the cost to taxpayers. For ordinary Americans, the Zumwalt became another example of a defense system that devoured money without delivering results. The numbers are staggering. The 3 Zumwalt-class destroyers cost nearly $25 billion in total. Add in research, testing, and redesigns, and the bill only grows. To put that in perspective, for the cost of 3 Zumwalts, the US could have built 30 proven destroyers, each armed to the teeth, each capable of real-world missions. Instead, taxpayers got 3 floating laboratories that even the Navy wasn't sure how to use. But it wasn't just about money. It was about trust. The Pentagon had once promised the Zumwalt would revolutionize naval warfare. Instead, it became a running joke on late-night TV. The most advanced destroyer in history had no ammunition for its guns. The pattern of failure. The Zumwalt is not an isolated case. In fact, it, as part of a pattern, a cycle of ambition, overspending, and political entanglement that traps the GS. Military and projects that refuse to die. Take the Literal Combat Ship LCS program. Marketed as a fast, flexible warship for shallow waters, it was supposed to be cheap and adaptable. Instead, it became plagued with breakdowns, weak armor, and mission modules that never worked. Billions were spent, dozens of ships built, and yet the Navy now plans to retire some of them decades earlier than expected. Or consider the F-35 Lightning II, the most expensive weapons program in history. Trillions spent across decades, endless delays, software issues, and yet the program trudges on because too much has already been invested to cancel it. This is what analysts mean when they say America's defense projects become too big to fail. Once the money flows, once the jobs are spread across congressional districts, once the contracts are locked in, the system sustains itself, even when the product doesn't work. Why they refuse to die? There are 3 main reasons disasters like the Zumwalt refuse to die. First, sunk costs. Billions are spent up front on research and development. To cancel the project outright would mean admitting that money was wasted. So instead, leaders double down, hoping to salvage something, anything from the wreckage. Second, politics. Defense contractors know how to spread the wealth. Parts of the Zumwalt were built in different states, ensuring multiple senators and congressmen had a stake in keeping the program alive. Killing the project would mean job losses, and no politician wants that headline. Third, national pride. The United States likes to think of itself as the world leader in military technology. To admit that a cutting-edge project failed would be a blow to the nation's image. So instead of saying we built a failure, officials reframe it as a platform for future innovation. The human side. Amid the politics and budgets, there's also the human side of the story. Thousands of engineers, shipbuilders, and sailors poured years of their lives into the Zumwalt. Many genuinely believed in its mission. For them, criticism of the program feels personal. It's not just about money, but about pride, hard work, and identity. And for the sailors assigned to Zumwalt-class destroyers, the experience is bittersweet. They serve aboard some of the most advanced ships ever built, yet those ships are often mocked by outsiders. They are pioneers, but also custodians of a program that will forever carry the label of failure, a cautionary tale. Today, the Zumwalt sails the oceans as a reminder of what happens when ambition collides with reality. It is not the first military program to spiral out of control, and it won't be the last. But it stands out because of its sheer scale: $8 billion per ship, guns that cannot fire, missions that no longer exist, a project that was meant to redefine warfare, now struggling to justify its very existence. And yet the Zumwalt is still here, still floating, still consuming resources, a disaster that refused to die. The bigger picture. So what does this mean for America? It means the country faces a hard truth: military innovation is necessary, but unchecked ambition can destroy itself. There is nothing wrong with aiming high. But when projects spiral beyond reason, when costs outweigh benefits, and when politics keeps failed systems alive, the result is waste on a historic scale. For every Zumwalt, there are opportunities lost: ships not built, aircraft not upgraded, defenses not strengthened. Taxpayers foot the bill, while the nation's enemies quietly take notes. The $8 billion destroyer may never fire a shot in anger, but as a lesson, it should fire a warning across America's bow. Closing narration. It was supposed to be the future. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. A monument of steel and ambition, drifting across the waves as proof that even the most powerful nation in history can build something it doesn't need, can't use, and can't kill. This is America's $8 billion disaster that refused to die.